Our guest today is the Senior Vice President and Editor of the Chicago Tribune. In preparing this introduction, I visited with a great friend of mine and a great friend of the City Club's, Chicago Tribune editorial page editor Bruce Nold. And here is what I learned. Number one, newspapers have gone through an incredibly difficult few years, particularly because of the internet. Number two, to quote Mark Twain, and I quote, "The reports of their demise has been greatly exaggerated." Number three, the Chicago Tribune in particular has gone through revolutionary change in its leadership, how it looks, and how it reports. Number four, Bruce reminded me, if we wanted a measure of the influence and impact of the Chicago Tribune, we got it from the strangest place. A little more than a year ago, our former governor was arrested. One of the charges was that he tried to hold up a financing deal for Wrigley Field worth an estimated $100 million until the Tribune fired its editorial board. The Chicago Tribune did not buckle. Now, that former governor is preparing for his trial, and the Tribune is still around, leading a campaign to clean up corruption in Illinois. Number five, our guest today is the leader of the Chicago Tribune Revolution and one of the national leaders in journalism today. He has the arrows in his back to prove it. Ladies and gentlemen, the Senior Vice President and Editor of the Chicago Tribune, Gerould Kern. Jerry?
Thank you very much. Glad to be here today. This is my first City Club meeting, so I'm going to try to make it my best. I wanted to introduce, I'll get into the spirit of things here that Jay set the tone for. Appreciate the introduction, but wanted to introduce some of my colleagues who are here today. Bruce, our editorial page editor. That's right. Joyce Winnicky, who's the associate editor of the paper. Jonathan Berlin, who's our graphics editor, and he's going to hopefully make me look good up here today. And Robin Daughtridge, who's our photo editor here. Robin. They've helped me tremendously. So I'm very pleased to be here with you today at the City Club. And I welcome the opportunity to talk to you about the Chicago Tribune, its future, and why the health of news organizations like ours matter to you. You've heard a lot about, about newspapers and their death spirals, and about how we're all about buggy whips and bankruptcy and, the late great newspaper in America. You may have heard that also that there isn't any public service journalism in Chicago any longer because we're a hollowed-out shell of our former selves. Well, that's simply not true, and I'm here today to tell you why. Like just about every other media company in America, the Chicago Tribune Media Group was hit hard by the structural changes in the industry, by the collapse of the advertising market, and the worst economy since the Great Depression. But today, I want to tell you why we're optimistic about the future and why it's important to you as we enter another election season in Illinois. 2009 was a year of trauma, and transformation for us. But because of the foundation that we laid last year and the work that we're doing right now, we believe that 2010 is a year filled with promise. It's promising because of the dedication of our people, reporters, editors, web designers, photographers, advertising sales reps, pressmen, market researchers, circulation truck drivers, frankly, everyone who believes in the work that we do. I also want to give credit to our publisher, Tony Hunter, who has exhibited extraordinary leadership during this time and helped create this environment where we can succeed. So here are the facts. Tribune Company, our corporate parent, is expected to emerge from Chapter 11 sometime this year, unburdened from the oppressive debt of a leveraged buyout that did not succeed. The Chicago Tribune is in the black, and from January through December of 2009, we steadily improved our cash flow and our financial performance. And unlike many other newspapers companies in the country that are now losing money, we have never been in the red. We're committed resolutely to local investigative reporting, and we have dramatically increased the resources devoted to it by resetting our priorities. We know that we must compete with every medium, every device that transmits information and consumes people's times. And the media companies, I think, that make it through the perilous passage of this new decade will be those that recognize this and can create a diversified, profitable portfolio for print, broadcast, and digital media. Because in 2010, the only way that you can gain a mass audience is through multiple channels that reach discrete audience segments, and that's what we are doing. So last year, during the worst economic downturn in 75 years, we launched new digital and print products and expanded others, and I want to tell you a little bit about them. We started Chicago Breaking News and Chicago Breaking Sports to be the go-to online places for news about the Chicago region. After just a few months, these breaking news blogs are topping 11 million page views monthly and are growing rapidly. They are part of all Tribune Company media sites, Chicago Tribune, WGN, CLTV, etc. But by themselves, they are the third most visited local news sites. Very soon, we're going to launch Chicago Breaking Business to cover news about the Chicago economy. In August, we launched Chicago Now, our new blog network with more than 150 blogs. These voices of Chicago discuss everything from sports to sex to commuting on the CTA. We might even have one about sex on the CTA, I don't know, but if we give Bill 80 enough time, he'll find one. After the first 5 months, Chicago Now tops 10 million monthly page views and is outstripping the growth trajectory that we predicted for it. We started our Trib to Go edition for newsstand sales a year ago today, actually, giving commuters a tabloid alternative to our home-delivered broadsheet edition. The Chicago Tribune is the only major American newspaper that publishes simultaneously in both formats. We just expanded Red Eye, our free newspaper for young urban professionals, from about 200,000 to 250,000 copies daily. Red Eye, which is only 6 years old, now circulates more copies in the city of Chicago Monday through Friday than any other newspaper, including the Chicago Tribune. Hoy, our Spanish language newspaper, just increased its circulation by 10% to meet growing demand. We expanded the MASH, our high school publication, into 150 city and suburban schools, and it now circulates more than 150,000 copies weekly. Trib Local, our hyper-local news network, grew in 2009 as well. It now serves 100 communities with 21 print and 80 editions and 87 websites. All told, we grew our total audience, print and online combined. Now, the Chicago Tribune Media Group isn't just a newspaper publisher, and the Chicago Tribune exists in both printed and electronic forms. But let's talk about the printed Chicago Tribune first. Like nearly all major metropolitan dailies, the print circulation of the Chicago Tribune is down. That's no secret. This is a long-term trend that predated the internet and has been accelerated by it and the growth of other media as well. Still, readership of the printed Chicago Tribune, and that's the number of people that actually read the paper, whether they buy a copy or not, is up year over year by the largest margin since measurements began 10 years ago. In fact, it's the only significant increase since 1999. Our readers are spending more time with the paper and reading it more often. I also point out that among the top 25 markets, only 2 newspapers, Chicago Tribune being one of them, showed any kind of growth, and ours was the largest. And by the way, these are measurements made by Scarborough, an independent company that audits readership across the nation. Finally, when you combine all the print and print editions, free and paid, Chicago Tribune, Red Eye, Oi, Fin de Semana, all of them, we are circulating 10% more print copies in the marketplace than we were in 2005. I also want to point out that combined traffic on all of our websites puts us at the top of local media. Local page views and visits are these are the most valuable to advertisers, grew by 30% in 2009. And we believe that the growth of print readership and local online traffic is the result of our emphasis on watchdog reporting, local coverage, and other changes that we've made. Now, we certainly don't have all the answers. No one does. And there are big questions to be answered about paid content online, mobile technology, e-readers, and many other issues. But we're working on them all. And I tell you this story of diversification not just to thump our drum, but to support this point. We are a business that is reinventing itself for tomorrow, and everyone in this room that owns a business understands what you have to do, that if you don't adapt and change, you die. And more important, there will be no meaningful journalism without that successful business foundation, one that makes enough money to pay for the reporting and delivers content that an audience values. Because in the end, our success will depend most on the courage of our reporting on vital public issues. And that's what we can do better than anyone else, and that's what the most valuable service we can offer to people. About a year ago, though, we were passing through our dark night. And let me tell you a story about one of the most important days in Chicago Tribune history and how it changed us and how it put us on this path. That day was Tuesday, December 9th, 2008. In the print and online editions that morning, Chicagoans learned that that Tribune Company had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Our loyal readers found it to be disturbing news. The acknowledgement that an institution long central to the life of Chicago was in peril. For those of us who work at the Chicago Tribune, the story was very dispiriting. Another blow in a year of upheaval. We saw the life of the institution pass before us that day. The Chicago Tribune is 162 years old, and our story is entwined with the history of the nation. This is the newspaper that helped launch the presidency of Abraham Lincoln. And it's the paper that rallied the city of Chicago to rebuild after the devastating fire of 1871. This is the newspaper of Robert R. McCormick, one of the titans of 20th century media, who built it into one of the largest circulation newspapers in America and used it to fuel the growth of the 2 new media of his era, radio and television. In recent years, our reporting helped free innocent men from death row, exposed corruption at City Hall, took on prosecutorial misconduct, and we were awarded journalism's highest honors for that work. But on December 9th, many wondered whether the Chicago Tribune would survive. Now, there was another story on the front page that day, one that ran right next to the Tribune bankruptcy story, and it was a Blockbuster exclusive. The U.S. Attorney's corruption probe of Governor Rod Blagojevich was now focusing on his appointment of a U.S. Senator to replace President-elect Barack Obama. That story was the culmination of 4 years of investigative work by Tribune reporters who relentlessly pursued Blagojevich's pay-to-play schemes. Early that morning, as the online edition posted that story and the print edition hit the doorsteps, Blagojevich was arrested at his Northwest Side home by federal agents intent on halting what the U.S. Attorney would call a political crime spree. Later in the day, as Jay mentioned, U.S. Attorney Patrick Fitzgerald made another surprising revelation. He alleged that Blagojevich had threatened to hold up Tribune Company's proposed sale of Wrigley Field until members of our editorial board were fired. Now, however surreal Blagojevich's performance had been in recent months, it appeared that we may have been the target of a government plot to silence us. So the confluence of those two stories, Tribune bankruptcy and the Blagojevich scandal, delivered an unmistakable message to us. We must solve our economic problems and reset our priorities in order to preserve the powerful public service reporting that the Blagojevich story represented. A city without a strong, vigilant newspaper committed to its welfare was unthinkable. And so the events of December 9th would mark a turning point for the Chicago Tribune. Now, these events galvanized us. We in the newsroom had been knocked down hard by the Chapter 11 news, but we did our jobs, and it mattered. We are not going to be intimidated, and we will fight like hell. And we recognized that day, as many others in Illinois did, that if we're not here to do our jobs, as well as our other colleagues in newspapers and journalism, the forces of crooked self-interest will win. So over the next few days, I gathered our top newsroom leaders, and I told them that the responsibility to see the paper through this period of its history now fell to us and our colleagues across Tribune. We had to make sure that the most important journalism that the Chicago Tribune performs on behalf of this region and its people lives on no matter who owns us now or in the future. It was our duty to make fundamental changes, many of which we had avoided for years, that would ensure our survival and form the foundation for our future success. Now, like many other major newspapers, the Chicago Tribune had been carrying out a series of painful layoffs, including the newsroom. Unfortunately, these layoffs were necessary because the scale of the operation no longer matched the revenue that would support it. Dealing with that economic reality took an enormous human and emotional toll. We said goodbye to many of our colleagues, good people and dedicated journalists, and that we worked alongside for many years. We resolved that while our newsroom would be smaller, it would focus like a laser on a few key areas where we could truly make a difference. Even with a smaller staff, we substantially increased our resources to investigative reporting and our online operation, and we put even greater emphasis on local news coverage. We reduced resources in other areas. We completely re-engineered our internal newsroom operation. We partnered with our sister papers, particularly the Los Angeles Times, on foreign and national coverage. Last spring, while the outside world may have only seen more layoffs and dislocation, inside we were remaking ourselves. We began to build a news organization that supported all of our media, digital, print, and increasingly broadcast, and we established these principles to guide us, and I want to share them with you because they're very important, and when you see them in our publications and our websites every day. We stand up for our community and citizens. Watchdog reporting is at the heart of our mission, and it drives everything that we do. It is what people want most from us. It also means using our editorial voice to shape opinion in this region, and for the first time in 30 years, we are publishing editorials on page one in service of this cause. Now, I want to talk more about the Watchdog mission shortly, and I will. We capture the Chicago experience. We reflect the drama, vitality, conflict, and hope of life in the Chicago area in the 21st century because this is the place where we live and work and play. We commit to being the first and best source of news, information, and knowledge for and about the Chicago region. Therefore, our news priorities really are centered on local government and community issues such as the explosion of youth violence in Chicago, the region's economy, local entertainment sports, and Chicago personalities. Local relevance, of course, is not strictly geographic. We will travel the world to tell stories that are relevant to Chicago, as we did to cover Illinois soldiers in action in Afghanistan, trace the deadly legacy of Agent Orange in Vietnam, both here in Chicago and there, or explore the world's tallest building in Dubai, a building designed by a Chicago architect here in the city where skyscrapers were born. We move people emotionally and intellectually, and we want the Tribune to be smart, authoritative, and intellectually stimulating, that's for sure, but we must connect with them on an emotional level. And for too many years, readers have told us they were ambivalent about their experience with us. So we want to give them stories that they can, give them a reason to care about us and the people that we write about. So increasingly, we're weaving stories into our report that more fully reflect the human condition, such as the story of Byron Taylor. 16 years ago, a haunting Tribune photo captured a teenage boy crying over a schoolmate's murder. We went on a quest and we found Byron today, a young man who has made something of his life, served in the Navy, got a graduate degree, and is now mentoring young people at his church and community. Or consider the story of Dawn Dubsky, a young, adventurous pediatric nurse who returned from a trip to Africa with a case of malaria that ultimately would rob her of her limbs. We told how she courageously fought back from the brink of death to find new purpose in her life. Readers respond to these stories, I think, with far more than calls and emails. For instance, when we published an article about how Omar Gutierrez of Evanston was helping Steve Walker, a local pizza delivery man who had been mugged and carjacked, people from around the world sent in more than $16,000 in donation, enough to buy Walker a new car so he could return to work. So people seek this kind of connection. We help people navigate their daily lives. We give people information that they can use to be better consumers, better citizens, and this may be as practical as giving people details about how Chicago's automatic parking meters work or don't work, or how to appeal tickets, to helping parents plan for the start of a new school year, or creating the most complete online database on nursing home health and safety records, as we did in the Compromised Care series that we published. We fuel conversation because in the end, the Tribune is really a social medium. We found that one of the biggest drivers of readership is how much people talk about the stories they encounter and share them with others. And there's room for fun in the newspaper. So we established a daily feature called The Talk on page 2 and 3, which is a virtual water cooler of news, observations, voices commenting about the news. And we added as well a new feature called Smack in our new Chicago sports section to stir the pot there. We're giving greater emphasis to our columnists, such as John Cass. And we're developing new voices and personalities to generate conversation. Finally, we break news. We don't just report it. It's no longer sufficient just to report the news that's readily available from many other sources. Our goal is to set the news agenda each day with original reporting, news that you can't get from anywhere else. We made our biggest push, however, in watchdog reporting. Now, it's not that the Chicago Tribune wasn't doing investigative reporting before. We were, and we were doing it very well. But we resolved to make watchdog reporting a daily, defining characteristic of our report. Investigative describes a method, but watchdog reflects a mentality. It says your problems are our problems, and we are committed to solving them with you. While watchdog reporting is everyone's responsibility at the Chicago Tribune, we built 4 teams to give this effort momentum. We established the government watchdog team. This includes, among others, the reporters and columnists who led the Blagojevich investigation for us. We created a consumer watchdog team This is a new department that focuses on consumer safety, health, and medicine. We expanded the role of the editorial board. Now our editorial writers are at the forefront of this watchdog mission. And I'm glad to say we hired Scott Stantis to fill a political cartoonist job that has been vacant for nearly a decade. And I hope you've enjoyed some of his cartoons as much as I have. We also added a new resource, a news applications team. This is a new breed of journalist who uses technology to master massive amounts of public information. They create searchable online databases that supercharge our investigative reporting, and they empower citizens as well, and they're a tough bunch. Don't mess with them. Every day we produce stories in our newspaper and our websites that identify wrongs, offer solutions, and spur actions. These have included investigations about toxic chemicals in the air, polluted wells and the suburban officials who look the other way, deadly flaws in our infant car seats and cribs, the connection between zoning and campaign donations in Chicago neighborhoods, consumers denied health care benefits, the junk science of dubious autism treatments, dangerous allergens in our food despite all the safeguards that we put up, the risk of mixing felons, the mentally ill, and the elderly in nursing homes, the damage that Vietnam-era defoliants are still inflicting on veterans and their families in the United States as well as the Vietnamese people, and this past Sunday, the shortcomings of a premier program designed to raise educational performance in city schools. Now, I want to talk about two of these stories in particular and how they relate to the upcoming election and why this should matter to you. Last February, just after Blagojevich was impeached, we promised readers that we would lead a campaign on our news pages and in our opinion pages to drive true political reform in Illinois. That campaign is called the State of Corruption, and in many ways, it's an old-fashioned newspaper crusade. We framed a 6-point agenda for cleaning up government in Illinois, and along with other reform-minded groups, we pushed hard for change, advocating for greater government transparency and putting teeth in the state's Freedom of Information Act, quick and thorough disclosure of campaign donations, stricter oversight of awarding of state contracts, enhanced anti-corruption powers for local prosecutors, an end to gerrymandered districts that protect incumbents, and citizen recall for public officials who abuse their power or simply fail to perform. Now, we began publishing editorials on page 1 of this newspaper, and in those editorials we called on our lawmakers to act, and we called them out when they didn't. We established an online open records help desk where we assist citizens to get public records that they are entitled to. Now, in the exuberance that followed Blagojevich's removal from office, the governor appointed an Illinois Reform Commission to recommend far-reaching changes. And then we witnessed an astounding sight. One by one, these sweeping recommendations were swept aside. The General Assembly did pass a campaign reform bill, which was touted as landmark legislation, but it was so flawed and the clamor against it was so loud that the governor and the leadership reversed course and vetoed it. They regrouped and passed a new bill, but while it limits what you can contribute, it grants legislative leaders tremendous freedom to transfer dollars to other lawmakers at election time, thereby increasing their power. Now, a few other measures were enacted, but just about everyone, including every major candidate for office, says much more needs to be done. Now, our political culture is not an abstraction. It's real, and it affects all of us. And if you want to see the impact of political entitlement on the lives of individual citizens, take a look at the scandal at the University of Illinois, the admission scandal. The Clout Goes to College investigation showed that how pervasive secret political privilege is in this state. And our reporting team, Jody Cohen, Tara Malone, and Stacy St. Clair, told the story of how politically connected applicants were being admitted to the university over more qualified students. The unfairness of this practice is outrageous and clear. Choosing a college and the opportunities that it represents is one of the most important moments in a young person's life, and acceptance should be based on merit. Yet some public officials who sponsored candidates regarded it as just another constituent service like cutting a curb in a sidewalk. Now, in the wake of the scandal, a new chairman and board of trustees has been appointed, and soon we will have a new president and a new chancellor. The infamous Category I list has been abolished, and we hope a fair and transparent admissions policy will be enacted. Now we are taking the political and ethical issues identified in the state of corruption campaign to the ballot box in February's second primary and the November general election. Quite simply, Illinois is in dire straits. In addition to our ethical problems, we face towering financial challenges too. We are not far behind Michigan and California, two states that are essentially broke. We've made a commitment at the Tribune to keep these issues front and center. And over the last 3 weeks, we've published a series of editorials on page 1 that makes the case for what citizens must do and what we must demand of our elected officials. We face a $12 billion operating shortfall, and in order to bridge that gap, the state delays payments to governments and vendors, and the delay is now about 180 days. And as a result, they can't pay their bills. Just last month, the University of Illinois said it was going to furlough its employees for a few days and warned that it might not have enough money to make it through the school year. Illinois faces crushing unfunded pension obligations of $95 billion that will burden not only us but future generations unless we come to grips with it. And when the economic recovery finally does come, Illinois may not share in it like other states. We ranked a dismal 48th in job creation in the decade from 1997 to 2007 and have fewer jobs today than we did 10 years ago. Now, rather than deal with the underlying problems, we are borrowing money to bridge the gap and pushing the inevitable solution down the road. We did not get into this fix in one election season, and we will not get out of it in one. But we must make a start, and this February 2nd is the place to begin. We've created a unique online resource to help voters make informed choices. The Chicago Tribune Election Center is an up-to-the-minute, searchable database that keeps track of all the news of state and local election races. It contains candidates' answers to questions on the issues, and it includes our endorsements as well. It has a ballot builder that helps you choose who to vote for based on this information. And we'll continue to add features, including a campaign donation tracker, so people can see who's funding these campaigns. And then we intend to turn the election center into a government accountability monitor that works for citizens between elections. We'll make it easy for people to track what their elected officials promised, what they did, how they voted, who gave them money, and which special interests support them so that you can make judgments about how well they serve you. I want to cite one passage from an editorial that we published called A Call to Arms. Illinoisans have watched their politicians resist aggressive reforms, both to how Illinois is governed and how state and county governments spend their money. As a result, the state is impoverished in spirit, and it is too impoverished financially to pay its bills. This confluence of man-made miseries menaces Illinois, so who will we elect to right Illinois? The answer to that question is up to us, and the instrument of change is the voting booth. Thank you very much. Please.
I'd be late returns. Since we use Michael's cars for those debates, we'll give him the honor because it's a great honor. It's like Alan Spivak. Well, that's the McKenna question. A little humor there, and only a few people caught. From Michael Bauer, have you ever done an assessment? Thank you, Michael. Long word. As to the impact the Trib brings, positive and have on election results? I think you understand the question. Not
Yeah.
from me, but you understand.
Well, we believe that our endorsements are valuable to people. We watch them closely. We will do so in this election. We believe, based on past performance and also just the reaction that we get from people, that these editorials and these endorsements do move voters. I'll give you one indication of the impact of our editorial page during this Blagojevich state of corruption period of time. We get lots of letters to the editor, to the Voice of the People. The number of letters, and I'm not talking about emails, I'm talking about printed letters, up about 25%. It's several thousand more as a result of the campaign that we've carried out. It'll be very interesting after this election to see, because we have put far more emphasis on page one on this. We have created new tools for people, and so we believe that people pay attention and view our guidance as valuable, and we'll monitor it and we'll find out.
This is from a guy named Tom Leahy, who may have to fight his way out of here. Where are you, Tom? Raise your hand. All right, he's a big guy, so you can do it. Why does by the way, Mr. Tyree, why does Chicago need two newspapers which purport to cover the same stories and service the same readers?
Well, I would challenge the premise of that. I think that we are very different newspapers, and I think that we provide different kinds of coverage. The audiences are not the same. I think it makes the city richer to have more voices, to have more news organizations out there. Competition is a great thing. I believe in it. I think it makes us better. And I think that it also makes us strive to reach, as news organizations, to tell stories that the other doesn't have. So I think there's room, and I'm all for competition. Bring it on.
Okay. We got to start handing out big markers. All right. Joyce Saxon, this is a City Club question. Jesus. What is the Tribune payroll today? Are the number of employees versus the number of employees 8 years ago? Well, you don't have to be 8 years ago. Have the employees go up or down?
I don't have those numbers available, and I also think that in some regard they're off point. We have a smaller staff than we did 8 years ago. Certainly, we have a smaller staff than we did a year ago. But the world has changed, and we also publish, frankly, we publish very differently. We publish far more channels online, in print, than we did before. So it's all, I think the issue is, how do you use the resources that you've got? And I think one of the challenges that newsrooms have had to overcome is that they look to some historical moment and say, back in 1995, we had 640 people, and therefore that is the standard by which we should be judged for all time. And that is not the right way of looking at it. It's what do you need today to be able to serve the audience and make the money that will support the journalism? And that, I think, is really the question that we're all asking, and we're all, those of us who will be successful will answer going forward. So I just don't have those specific numbers. So
don't you get on this side?
All right.
A lot more light on this side. All right, here we go. Tracy Poyser, where are you, Tracy? Ah, that back room. Another very friendly question. When will the Tribune stop dumbing down page 3 of the main section in favor of more serious news again?
Excellent question.
This is the City Club. If you want softballs, you're in the wrong place.
No, that's fine. I've also heard that I've heard variations on that. I will say this: everybody has a viewpoint and an opinion about what's valuable, and one of the difficulties in publishing
Jill Swick, former state representative.
I think I'll have to go after this one.
Might not be a bad idea. From Jill Swick, you'll like this one. How can you stop another gerrymandered map from being imposed on us? That is the legislative remap I assume you're speaking to, Ms. Wick. Are you asking candidates, Bruce Dole can answer this, if they will oppose their leaders if necessary? You don't have to answer that because I can answer that. No, they're not, and if they said they would, they were lying. Go ahead. But go ahead. Help you out a little.
One of the reform principles that we have put forward is to reform the redistricting process. We face, a census in 2010 that will set the, stage for, redistricting in the state, which will set the boundaries for another 10 years. We've reported on our news pages and advocated on the opinion pages that we think a different system needs to be put into place than has existed. We've cited Iowa as an example, where they use a combination of computer generated maps and demographics, and they generate what are more logical district maps, and they present those as alternatives to the legislature to approve. I think we favor something like that. We feel like it would be fairer. The incredible, contorted redistricting lines that you see are there to preserve incumbency and party power, and we think that that is not the right way of doing it.
Very good answer. Remember, this is where my old professor said one map maker is worth 500 precinct workers. So good luck on that one. Milt Rakoff. Here we go. Joe Thornton, where are you? Oh, right in front. All right. Starts off nice. I applaud the watchdog focus, but the red eye success is distressing. Can you promise that the Chicago Tribune in tabloid format will always be true to the broadside and not mimic the red eye any more than it does? I think you want to say be true to its origins, and okay, I'll read the way you said it then. Be true to the broadside and not mimic the red line any more than it does.
I think I've just made it clear what our principles are and what we're going to stand for. And I think that we've done that first and talked about it second. So, I stand on what we've outlined and what we are doing day by day. I'll say this about Red Eye. Red Eye's been an enormous success because it understands its audience and it gives them what they want. And it's not just, and I would also say as well that you are a member of many audiences, depending on your time and your circumstances and your situation. And there are times during the day that you may be a Red Eye reader. You may be also a Chicago Tribune reader. You may be a Chicago Now blog network audience. You use all of those in different situations and different circumstances. So it's important for us, I think, to differentiate those media to serve those audiences. And it would not make sense if we simply put out in a variety of different forms exactly the same publication or website. We're all about trying to reach the audience with what it needs at that moment.
We'll skip this last question. How about a big round of applause?
Oh. Okay. Thank you.
An official.
All right. Thank you.
Wait a minute. This place just knows about giving. A 1-year membership to you for the member of the City Club If the Tribune really does well, you'll expect to pay up next year.
All right.
And when you have one of those alternative readings that you just talked about, this book will knock your socks off. The History of the City Club of Chicago.
Fabulous.
Unexpurgated. We are adjourned.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.